Welcome to the Reading the Bible Daily with Dave podcast. This podcast is devoted to helping increase your daily exposure to God's Word with a short scripture reading and brief commentary on key ideas, themes, and theology in each chapter. Now please join your host, Dave Jenkins, for today's episode.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Reading the Bible Daily with Dave podcast. My name is Dave, and I'm the host for this show. And today is February 15th, and today we're going to look at Joshua 15:1 through Joshua 19:5. I know that's a lot of text, but that's what we have before us today. So just by way of reminder, every day I read from one chapter of God's Word. So today, more than one chapter, actually. And then I'm going to provide key ideas, themes, and the theology in these chapters today. My goal is to get you into God's Word for about 5 to 20 minutes or so every day. So let's look now at Joshua 15:1 through Joshua 19:5. And Joshua 15:1 through Joshua 19:5 says this: The allotment for the tribe of the people of Judah, according to their clans, reached southward to the boundary of Edom, to the wilderness of Zin at the farthest south. And their south boundary ran from the end of the Salt Sea, from the bay that faces outward. It goes out southward of the ascent of Akrabam, passes along to Zin, and then goes up to the south of Kadesh Barnea, along by Hezbron, up to Adar, turns about to Karka, passes along Asmon, and goes out by the brook of Egypt, and then comes to its end at the sea. This shall be your south boundary. And the east boundary is the Salt Sea, to the mouth of the Jordan. And the boundary on the north side runs from the bay of the sea at the mouth of the Jordan. And the boundary goes up to Beth Hogel and passes along the north of Beth Arabia. And the boundary goes up to the stone of Bohan, the son of Reuben. And the boundary goes up to Debir from the valley of Achor, and so northward, turning towards Gilgal, which is opposite the ascent of Adam, which is on the south side of the valley. And the boundary passes along the waters of En Shemesh and ends at En Rogel. Then the boundary goes up to the valley of the son of Hinnon at the southern shoulder of Jebusite, that is Jerusalem. And the boundary goes up to the top of the mountain that lies over the valley of Hinnon on the west, at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. And then the boundary extends from the top of the mountain to the spring of the waters of Nephtah, and from there to the cities of Mount Ephraim. And then the boundary bends around to Bela, that is Kiriath Jearim. And the boundary circles west of Bela to Mount Seir, passes along to the northern shoulder of Mount Jearim, that is Sheslon, and goes down to Beth Shemesh and passes by Timnah. The boundary goes out to the shoulder of the hill north of Ekron. Then the boundary bends around to Shikron and passes along Mount Bel and goes out to Jabneel. Then the boundary comes to an end at the sea. And the west boundary was the Great Sea with its coastline. This is the boundary around the people of Judah according to their clans. According to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, he gave to Caleb the son of Jephunneh a portion among the people of Judah, Kiriath Araba, that is Hebron. Araba was the father of Anak. And Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Shesi, Ammon, and Talmai, the sons of Anak. And he went up from there against the inhabitants of Debir. Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath Sepher. And Caleb said, Whoever strikes Kiriath Sepher and captures it, to him I will give Achish my daughter as a wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, the brother of Caleb, captured it. And he gave Achish his daughter as a wife. And then she came to him. She urged him to ask her father for a field. And she got her donkey, and Caleb said to her, What do you want? She said, Give me a blessing, since you have given me the land of the Negeb. Give me also springs of water. And he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. This is the inheritance of the tribe of the people of Judah according to their clans. The cities belonging to the tribe of the people of Judah in the extreme south toward the boundary of Edom were Kabzel, Ebder, Jagur, Kena, Demoth, Ada, Kedesh, Hazor, Ithan, Zip, Telem, Bealoth, Hazor, Hadeth, Kirzon, Hezron, that is Hazor, Amnon, Shema, Molda, Hazar Gata, Heshmon, Beth Pelet, Hazar Shul, Beersheba, Beesthea, Bala, Eam, Ezem, El-Tolad, Chezel, Hormah, Zilgad, Madamah, Sasana, Leolith, Shimeon, Ain, and Rimmon, in all 29 cities with their villages. In the lowland, Eskel, Zorah, Ashna, Zona, En-Ganim, Tapia, Enan, Jarmuth, Adullam, Sokoth, Ezekiel, Shazaran, Adathemian, Gederatheum, 14 cities with their villages. Zenin, Haddish, Mildal, Gad, Deliath, Mizpah, Jokkiel, Lachish, Bosan, Eglon, Kabun, Lathan, Shilesh, Gilthon, Beth Dagon, Naamah, and Makkedah, 16 cities with their villages. Libnah, Ether, Ashan, Ibla, Ashna, Nizeg, Keilah, Ashton, and Mareshah, 9 cities with their villages. Ekron with its lower villages and its villages, from Ekron to the sea, all that were by the side of Ashdod with their villages. Ashdod, its towns and its villages. Gaza, its towns and its villages, to the brook of Egypt, and the great sea with its coastline. And in the hill country, Shamir, Jaddith, Sokoth, Dana, Kiriath, Sana, that is Debar, Anab, Esthema, Anan, Goshen, Holah, Hyla, 11 cities with their villages. Arab, Duma, Eshen, Janin, Beth Tapia, Apith, Humatah, Kiriath Araba, that is Hebron, and Zior, 9 cities with their villages. Maon, Carmel, Zebeth, Judah, Jezreel, Jokadima, Zanath, Cain, Gibeah, and Timon, 10 cities with their villages. Havilah, Beth Zur, Gedor, Merah, Beth Anan, and Ethkatan, 6 cities with their villages. Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jearim, and Rabbah, 2 cities with their villages. In the wilderness, Beth Araba, Midian, Sikra, Nibson, the city of salt, Egdon, 6 cities with their villages. But the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah, could not drive out. So the Jebusites dwell with the people of Judah at Jerusalem to this day. The allotment of the people of Joseph went from the Jordan by Jericho, east of the waters of Jericho, into the wilderness, going up from Jericho into the hill country to Bethel. Then going from Bethel to Luz, it passes along Althrath, the territory of the Archites. Then it goes down westward to the territory of the Jethites, as far as the territory of lower Beth Horon, and then to Gezer, and it ends at the sea. The people of Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim received their inheritance. The territory of the people of Ephraim by their clans was as follows. The boundaries of their inheritance on the east was Atara Adar, as far as upper Beth Horon. And the boundary goes from there to the sea. On the north is Michmath, and on the east the boundary turns around towards Tanis Shiloh, and then passes along behind it on the east to Janeth, and then it goes down from Janeth to Atta and to Nara, and then touches Jericho, ending at the Jordan. From Tappa, the boundary goes westward to the brook Kanah and ends at the sea. Such is the inheritance of the tribe of the people of Ephraim by their clans, together with the towns that were set apart for the people of Ephraim, within the inheritance of the Manassites, all those towns with their villages. However, they did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, so the Canaanites have lived in the midst of Ephraim to this day, but have not made to do forced labor. Then allotment was made to the people of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph. To Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, were allotted Gilead and Bashan, because he was a man of war. And allotments were made to the rest of the people of Manasseh by their clans: Abiezer, Helek, Ashriel, Shechem, Hefer, and Shemidah. These were the male descendants of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, by their clans. Now Zelphad, the son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, had no sons but only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Haglah, Machlah, and Tirzah. They approached Eleazar the priest and Joshua the son of Nun and the leaders of the people and said, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance along with our brothers. So according to the mouth of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among the brothers of their father. Thus there fell to Manasseh 10 portions, beside the land of Gilead and Bashan, which is on the other side of the Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance along with his sons. The land of Gilead was allotted to the rest of the people of Manasseh. The territory of Manasseh reached from Asher to Milcomah, which is east of Shechem. Then the boundary goes along southward into the inhabitants of En Tupia. The land of Tupia belonged to Manasseh, but the town of Tupia on the boundary of Manasseh belonged to the people of Ephraim. Then the boundary went down to the brook Cana. These cities to the south of the brook among the cities of Manasseh belonged to Ephraim. Then the boundary of Manasseh goes to the north side of the brook, and the ends at the sea, the land to the south being Ephraim, and to the north being Manasseh's, with sea forming its boundary. On the north, Asher is reached, and on the east, Issachar. And also in Issachar and Asher, Manasseh had Beth Shean and its villages, and Ebelim and its villages, and the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, and the inhabitants of Endor and its villages, and the inhabitants of Tanakh and its villages, and the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages. The third is Napith. And yet the people of Manasseh could not take possession of those cities, but the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. Now when the people of Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. Then the people of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me? And Joshua said to them, If you are a numerous people, go up by yourselves to the forest, and there clear the ground for yourselves in the land of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, since the hill country of Ephraim is too narrow for you. The people of Joseph said, The hill country is not enough for us. And yet all the Canaanites who dwell in the plain have chariots of iron, both those in Beth Shean and its villages, and those in the valley of Jezreel. Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, You are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have one allotment only, but the hill country shall be yours. For though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to the farthest borders. For you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and though they are strong. Then the whole congregation of the people of Israel assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them. There remained among the people of Israel 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been apportioned. So Joshua said to the people of Israel, How long will you put off going in to take possession of the land which the Lord, the God of your fathers, has given you? Provide 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them out, that they may set out and go up and down the land. They shall write a description of it with a view to their inheritances, and then come to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions. Judah shall continue in his territory on the south, and the house of Joseph shall continue in their territory on the north. And you shall describe the land in 7 divisions, and bring the description here to me. And I will cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. The Levites have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is our heritage. And Gad and Reuben and half the tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan eastward, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. And so the men arose and went, and Joshua charged those who went to write the description of the land, saying, Go up and down in the land and write a description and return to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh. So the men went and passed up and down in the land and wrote in a book a description of it by towns and 7 divisions. Then they came to Joshua to the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord. And there Joshua apportioned the land to the people of Israel, to each his portion. The lot of the tribe of the people of Benjamin, according to its clans, came up, and the territory allotted to it fell between the people of Judah and the people of Joseph. On the north side, their boundary began at the Jordan. Then the boundary goes up to the shoulder north of Jericho, then up through the hill country westward and ends at the wilderness of Beth Aven. From there, the boundary passes along the southward in the direction of Luz to the shoulder of Luz, that is Bethel. Then the boundary goes down to Ator Adar on the mountain that lies south of lower Beth Horon. Then the boundary goes in another direction, turning on the western side southward from the mountain that lies to the south opposite Beth Horon, and it ends at Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jearim, a city belonging to the people of Judah. This forms the westward side, and the southern side begins at the outskirts of Kiriath Jearim. And the boundary goes from there to Ephraim, to the springs of the waters of Nephtah. And there the boundary goes down to the borders of the mountain that overlooks the valley of the sons of Hinnom, which is at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. And it goes down the valley of Hinnom south of the shoulder of Jebusites, and downward to En Rogel. Then it bends in a northerly direction, going in En-Shemesh, and from there goes to Gileath, which is opposite the ascent of Adum. Then it goes to the stone of Bethel, the son of Reuben, and passes on to the north of the shoulder of Beth Araba as it goes down to the Araba. Then the boundary passes on the north side of the shoulder of Beth Hogel, and the boundary ends at the northern bay of the Salt Sea at the south side of the Jordan. This is the southern border. The Jordan forms its boundary on the east side. This is the inheritance of the people of Benjamin, according to their clans, boundary by boundary all around. Now the cities of the tribe of the people of Benjamin, according to their clans, were Jericho, Beth Hogel, Emek Kizit, Beth Araba, Zemarin, Bethel, Avan, Para, Oprah, Shinan, Ammon, Ophinai, Geba, 12 cities with their villages, Gibeon, Ramah, Beeroth, Mizrah, Shinza, Moza, Rechaim, Irpal, Terrell, Zerah, Hail, Jebus, that is Jerusalem, Gibeah, and Kiriath Jearim, 14 cities with their villages. This is the inheritance of the people of Benjamin according to their clans. The second lot came out for Simeon, for the tribe of the people of Simeon, according to their clans. And their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the people of Judah. And they had for their inheritance Beersheba, Sheba, Molda, Hazar, Shual, Bela, Ezem, Eltad, Bethel, Horah, Ziklag, Beth Makubah, and Hazar Shuas. Well, this is our reading today from Joshua 15:1 through Joshua 19:5. Now, our text that I just read stands at the center of a long unit that extends from Joshua 13:8 to Joshua 21:42, dealing with the distribution of the inheritance. It occupies a key position here. Chapters 20 through 21 of Joshua, while strictly part of the distribution narrative, can also be treated as a separate unit since they deal with the cities of refuge and the provisions made for the tribe of Levi. So for the purposes of our episode today, we will pick up the text at Joshua 15:1 and follow it through to the end of Joshua 19. With the inheritance of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh already established east of the Jordan, attention now turns to Judah, preceded by the story of Caleb, which takes priority due to the Lord's specific promise to him long before by allocation by lot. The last sentence of Joshua 14, concluding the Caleb narrative, and the land had rest from war in verse 15 of that chapter, echoes the last sentence of chapter 11, which rounded off the conquest section. Now, with that testimony to all that Yahweh has achieved for his people echoing in our ears, we are ready to turn our attention to the tribes who inherit the land west of the Jordan. Which parts of the land that is now at rest will be allocated to each tribe, clan, and family. Well, we have discussed before the reason for the many details recorded in these chapters, but it is a good time to remind ourselves that it is all primarily a witness to the faithfulness of God, who had promised this to his people centuries before. First, we see 2.5 tribes west of the Jordan, which are Judah, whose inheritance is described in great detail, Ephraim and half of Manasseh, which leaves the 7 tribes still to be settled, excluding Levi. And remembering also that Manasseh, while geographically divided, is essentially still one tribal unit. Howard helpfully draws attention to the fact that the lists are not identical in structure, emphasis, or length, but are composed of different elements that he identifies, firstly, as boundary lists and city lists, and second, notices of cities or territories remaining to be conquered. Third, stories of individuals or groups asking for and receiving their inheritance. 4, miscellaneous regularities, mostly involving stereotypical introductory and concluding statements. Joshua 18, with Joshua's instructions for the land's 7 division, then intervenes before we are shown how the allotment works itself out with reference to Benjamin, Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. Here then is the proof both to Israel and to all Joshua's readers that Yahweh will keep the promises that he has made. He has the power and he has the righteous integrity always to do what he says he will do. As each Israelite tribe and clan and family came up, here was the proof that what was true for the nation was also true in specific detail for him as an individual. This is why they had believed and what they had fought for, and here was the terra firma that it was theirs, proving that none of this had been in vain. Now, commentators from Calvin onward have indicated that Judah comes first in the order, primarily because of the special blessings conferred on it by Jacob in Genesis 49. As the Old Testament story develops, Judah assumes increasing importance among the 12, not least because King David and his descendants come from Judah, as does great David's greater son, the Lord Jesus Christ, according to Matthew 1:1. So after the division of the kingdom, it is Judah by which the southern kingdom is known, with its capital in Jerusalem and the Lord's temple there, so that in every way this tribe has a supremacy among the brothers. In Joshua 15:1-12, its boundaries are carefully and clearly set out with regard to all 4 points of the compass. The southern boundary extends from the southern end of the Dead Sea westward to the Mediterranean. The eastern boundary is the western shores of the Dead Sea, while to the north it stretches from the northern end of the sea beyond Jerusalem to the area of Ekron and so westward to the Mediterranean. After the digression regarding Caleb's inheritance, the allocation continues with the list of the Canaanite towns included in it, beginning with the Negeb in the south, followed by the foothills of the west, and the Philistine settlement at the coast. The list then moves to the hill country and concludes with the desert. As the list develops, the number of towns and villages is totaled to give an escalating sense both of the size and the scope of the conquest and also of all that still needs to be done. As a reminder of those realities, verse 63 honestly records the fact that they could not drive out the Jebusites from Jerusalem, although Joshua had killed its king and defeated its armies in battle of Gibeon in Joshua 10. This is one of a series of ominous notes that occurs throughout this chapter, pointing to the incomplete nature of the conquest and the problem that will create for Israel in the future. Now in Judges 1:21, the failure is attributed to the tribe of Benjamin, probably because Jerusalem was situated on the border between the tribes, although it seems from Judges 1:8 that Judah may have had some temporary limited success. A comment made by John Calvin may strike us as somewhat severe, but its theological acumen is surely justified when he says, had they exerted themselves to the full measure of their strength and failed of success, the dishonor would have fallen on God himself, who had promised that he would continue with them as their leader until he would give them full and free possession of the land. Therefore, it was owing entirely to their sluggishness that they did not make themselves masters of the city of Jerusalem. Their own torpor, their neglect of the divine command from a love of ease, these were the real obstacles. Now again, the favor of Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49 seems to be the reason why the two sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, feature next in their allocation. With half of Manasseh already settled on the east of the river, the remaining half, along with Ephraim, are given large territories in the central part of the land, including many of the place names that become increasingly familiar to us as the Old Testament unfolds. After the quite detailed delineation of the southern boundary in Joshua 16, Joshua 16:5-10 gives the details of the territory for Ephraim, followed by those for the western Manasseh in Joshua 17:1-13. The point is made that although they were reckoned as two tribes, they drew only one by lot, which is the reason for the complaint made in Joshua 17:14-18, which says, "Why have you given me but one lot and one portion as an inheritance, although I am a numerous people, since all along the Lord has blessed me?" And so it seems that they are accusing Joshua of using their common descent from Joseph in order to deprive them of more territory that they should claim to be rightly theirs. Now his reply is masterly. If they are such a great and numerous company, why do they not go out and attack the enemy whose territory had been allotted to them but not yet taken in verse 15? The implication is that they have been allocated more than adequate space, but they must exercise energy and determination to make it their own. Their territory was not insufficient, but their energy and their faith seems to be, as their reply indicated. There was a great deal of forested land in the hill country to be won, and then presumably cleared, but it would be a demanding project. Their response is to quibble about the unsuitability of their allocation, which will confine them to the plain where the Canaanites are still dwelling, and they have chariots of iron, according to verse 16 of Joshua 17. But Joshua will not move an inch further. If they are so numerous, let them use their numbers and strength to subdue the land and drive out the Canaanites, whatever their weaponry is. It is as though he's asking them, have you learned nothing from the whole experience of the conquest? Provision is made for them to have more territory, but they will have to subdue it and settle it by their own energy and persistence. The question as to whether they will have the faith of Joshua to accomplish the project is left hanging in the balance. There is one other curious incident in this section concerning the 5 daughters of Zelophehad in Joshua 17:3-6. Here again, there is a backstory recorded in Numbers 26:33, where they are first named, in Numbers 27:1-11, where their circumstances are revealed. Their father had died in the wilderness, and they had no brothers, so they appealed directly to Moses and Eleazar that their family name should not be moved, but that they should be given an inheritance among their father's brothers in the tribe of Manasseh. And so the Lord himself introduced Moses to grant their request and establish laws of inheritance that enabled its transfer to a man's daughter if he died having no sons. And so, much like Caleb, the 5 women come forward now to claim their God-given and promised inheritance. They are another example of trust in the promises of Yahweh, confirmed by the award of a personal inheritance to each of them as daughters of Manasseh. Like Rahab and Achish before them in the book, because of their faith, they are not to be excluded from God's blessing on the basis of gender. Now, the establishment of the tabernacle at Shiloh is now the focus, at the center of this section dedicated to the distribution of the land. We have heard the provision of the 5 tribes, or 4 if Ephraim and Manasseh are to be considered as one unit. That would mean that Levi would then be rightly considered as the 12th tribe, because no allocation of territory is to be made to Levi, so we can treat Ephraim and Manasseh as distinct in terms of the 12 tribal groups among whom the land is distributed. Now, here we are at the halfway point with 7 more tribes to be covered. This all happens in a relatively short compass in chapters 18 and 19, which we are encouraged to see as a unit by the marker post or bracketing at the beginning in Joshua 18:1, and the end in Joshua 19:51 by reference to Shiloh. Joshua moves his center of operations from Gilgal to Shiloh, situated in the middle of the country. This signifies a shift from being on a war footing with the main camp at Gilgal to being at rest, until the point the tabernacle and the ark have either been adjunct to the camp or possibly peripatetic as at Jericho. But now there is sufficient rest for a convocation of the whole congregation together at Shiloh and to establish the shrine of God's manifest presence there on a more permanent basis. It was still there at the time of Samuel's birth and childhood, indeed until the ark was captured by the Philistines at the time of Eli's death in 1 Samuel 1-4. We must not lose the significance of Joshua 18:1. The people of God are established in the land, and the presence of God is located in their midst at Shiloh, northwest of Jericho, and the territory of Ephraim. The occasion now is used by Joshua to stir the people to renewed effort in taking possession of those parts of the land over which they did not yet exercise control. He accuses them of growing slack in their prosecution of the conquest in Joshua 18:3, reminding them again that the land is God's gracious gift to them. Much of the land that had been allocated already was in their hands, but this was either the settlements east of the river or the central and the southern areas allocated to Judah and Ephraim and Manasseh. As the allocations began to move further out and further across the country, more and more would need to be done to make these territories their own. So to ensure the fair and just distribution of the land, when the lots were cast, Joshua appoints 21 surveyors, not spies, but reconnaissance officers, 3 from each of the 7 remaining tribes, to go up and down the land and write a description of it in verse 4, reminding them of the allocations already made, which will not change, and also of the fact that Levi is excluded. Joshua commissions them to divide the land into 7 portions and to describe it fully, bringing their findings in written form back to him in verses 5-7. The plan is activated, and eventually the men return with a description of it by towns and 7 divisions, written in a book in verse 9. Now, on receiving this information, Joshua is ready to cast lots for the 7 tribes, and the result is recorded for us in the rest of the section. The task was accomplished, and the unity of the nation was preserved and perhaps even enhanced by these provisions. Benjamin is the first of the 7 to whom the lot falls. Again, as with Judah, the boundaries are described in considerable detail, followed by a listing of the cities, 26 in all. Benjamin's northern boundary is the same as Ephraim's southern. Simeon is next, and their inheritance was in the midst of the inheritance of the people of Judah in Joshua 19:1. As a sort of enclave. We are told in Joshua 19:9 that this was because Judah's share was too large for them, although it had already indicated by lot. However, this later amendment had equal divine authority, and Simeon received 17 cities with their villages in Joshua 19:1 through 9. Since the patriarchal blessing of Jacob in Genesis 49 seemed to have a shaping role in the order of the allocation of the land, it is worth noting that Genesis 49:7 states about Simeon and Levi, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Certainly, the subsequent listing of Simeon is one of declining numbers and loss of identity. The third lot came up for Zebulun, mentioned before his older brother Issachar, as in the order of Genesis 49:13 and 14. The territory assigned is in the northern of the country, bounded by Asher to the west, Naphtali to the north, and Issachar to the south, according to Joshua 19:10 through 16. Issachar comes next in Joshua 19:17 through 23, with more detail given to the cities than to the boundaries. Asher is fifth in Joshua 19:24 through 31, where again the focus is on the 22 cities. Naphtali follows in Joshua 19:32 through 39, with territory situated between Asher and the upper Jordan. His land includes attractive, densely forested mountains and fairly fertile lower areas. And through this heartland of Galilee ran the major trade route between Jezreel and points northward. Last came Dan in Joshua 19:40 through 48, and again the emphasis is on the cities, which indicate its general location between Judah and Ephraim to the west of Benjamin, which includes the coastal region of the Mediterranean Sea. Verse 46 is an interesting but ominous interpolation from the time perspective of the narrator writing after the days of Joshua. The bald statement is that their territory was lost to them, or literally went out from them. Perhaps it was never properly taken, or perhaps the Danites occupied it only briefly, but the fact of their northern migration to Leshem, which they captured and renamed Dan, is well documented in Judges. Judges 1:34 says, the Amorites pressed the people of Dan back into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down to the plain. In fact, it was the house of Joseph that subjugated the Amorites, which may indicate some lack of commitment or effort on behalf of the Danites. The full account of their migration north, recounted in Judges 18, makes very sad reading, culminating in their setting up their own shrine, carved image, and independent priesthood to rival the house of God at Shiloh. Joshua 19:49 through 51 concludes the narrative of the allocation by focusing on Joshua's own personal inheritance given to him by the people of Israel in accordance with the command of Yahweh. During the whole process of the distribution, Joshua had been a wise, motivational, and impartial leader with no apparent concern for himself. Like Caleb, he had received God's promise back in Numbers 14:30 that he would dwell in the land, and he was probably content to rest in that. Certainly, his inheritance here at the end of the unit is intended to balance the inheritance given to Caleb at the beginning. In fact, these 3 verses bring a sense of completion to the section. Being from the tribe of Ephraim, he asked for a city in their territory to settle back among his people at Timnath-Serah in the hill country. This is where he would die and be buried, according to Judges 2:9. The uniqueness of his life of service is matched in the gracious kindness of the Lord with the unique gift of a city as his personal possession, even if it had to be rebuilt, since, as Calvin surmised, it was a mere heap of stones. Joshua 19:51 closes the unit in an appropriately formal way. The agenda is completed. The meeting is closed. The task is finished. So they finish dividing the land. The Shiloh convocation has done its work. It has all taken place at the command of the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and thus before the Lord, and he had providentially overruled in his sovereign distribution of lots. The land that was his alone to give, he granted to his people, not just in a general sense, but in a specific detail, town by town, tribe by tribe. That gift had now to be received by faith and turned into reality by continuing trust and energetic obedience as Israel committed herself to possess her possessions indeed. Those same qualities are still required in the people of God today if we are enter in more deeply and fully to the potential of all that we already have in Christ. John Rippon in How Firm a Foundation said, "How firm a foundation, you saints of the Lord, is laid for your faith in his excellent word. What more can he say than to you he has said, you who unto Jesus for refuge have fled? Fear not, I am with you. Oh, be not dismayed. For I am the Lord your God, and will still give you aid. I'll strengthen you and help you and cause you to stand, upheld by my righteous, omnipotent hand." Well, I want to thank you for listening or watching today's episode of Reading the Bible Daily with Dave. My name is Dave, and today is February 15th, and we've looked at Joshua 15:1 through the end of Joshua 19. Until tomorrow, may the Lord richly bless you and keep you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Reading the Bible Daily with Dave podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show and rate us wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to also like, subscribe, or follow Servants of Grace on Facebook, Instagram, X, or YouTube. We appreciate your support.